I never wanted to be a sports broadcaster. At least early on, my aspirations were to be a Major League Baseball player. Growing up in California, that's what I wanted to be. The way I got to ESPN is so unconventional. I don't think it can happen that way anymore because I'm not a college graduate. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. You know, a lower income family, split family, big family. My mom's a Honduran immigrant. We're lucky enough to go to a junior college. But I also, spent a couple years in the Army back when they actually drafted people. I was dumb enough to get drafted. I was proud to serve my country, but still dumb enough to get drafted. They don't have a draft anymore. My goal was to be a teacher and a coach. I went back to my old high school and helped out there, primarily on the basketball side of things, because I played basketball as well. I lost my spleen playing football. So I gave my spleen, and yet the Army still took me. That's why I'm still irritated about it. No, I'm kidding, because I did become a man during those 2 years in the Army, at least closer to being a man. But in baseball, I was very active doing that, but I was also working part-time. My old baseball coach got me a job at a local newspaper called the South Bay Daily Breeze, which is covered 32 high schools or the area in the beach community. We like to say from LAX to LA Harbor. And if you look at the map, so I covered high school sports on a part-time basis, the old-time stuff, and eventually, they had an opening, and they asked me if I'd fill it for a summer while I was off from school, and I said sure, and then they ended up offering me the job. And since at that point, I actually decided I really liked working, doing newspaper work and stories, and plus you're still competing against other newspapers. So you had a level of competition, which is something I enjoyed in sports. You had a skill that maybe thought, okay, I liked writing, I liked reporting, I like relationship building, which is what you do with the high school football coaches, or baseball or basketball coaches, because it's every sport. George Brett was a senior in high school when I first started part time at the Daily Breeze.
Okay.
And he played a little football too, by the way. But it evolved from there. But eventually I started covering baseball. I actually started covering the Dodgers with Tommy Lasorda's first 6 years there, and traveled with the team. At that point we all traveled with the team, and was a baseball writer. I was single, which means travel was great. I loved baseball. And then the Atlanta Journal-Constitution offered me a job to cover the Braves, and moved there in '82 or '83, can't remember. So now I'm 32 years old. Great thing about going to Atlanta and working in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I was in the Eastern Time Zone. Even though it was in the South, more people see your work. Okay, so it's almost like, hey man, all of a sudden people start to notice your work. What's even better is I met my wife, Mickey, not like Mickey Mantle, but with an I at the end of it. And I met my wife at the ballpark, actually during an Atlanta Braves game. She worked, with the press box attendant, and met her there, and we got married. Eventually we got married. Eventually we started a family, and once she became pregnant with my son, Alex, decided I wanted to get off the road of baseball, and said, let me go. They said, what do you want to do? I said, let me go cover the Falcons for a year and figure it out. And so that's actually how I started covering the NFL. And then from covering the Falcons for a couple of years, it evolved into some NFL and some investigative stuff. Next thing I know, the National Sports Daily, which nobody remembers, but Frank DeFord started it. And they asked me and a lot of people, quite a few people from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which was, winning a number of national awards, to come join them, and it was exciting because they were going to pay us a lot of money for sports writers. That was part of it. We were also going to be part of something exciting, like a USA Today, but only sports only. And we had the best staff. People tell you we had the best staff. Problem is, on the business side of it, it didn't work, and they couldn't distribute it properly. But you know what? The few people that did read it were people in the broadcast industry. And at that point, a guy like Will McDonough from the Boston Globe had been on TV, and Will was so good, and he's still the best it ever was in terms of the insider information. All of a sudden you had a little bit different vision of what you can be one day, and the National folded about the same time I was having some dialogue with a couple of the networks. I was working behind the scenes at CBS Sports when Gumbel and Bradshaw went into the studio for the first time on weekends, because we didn't publish on the weekends. And the next thing I know, ESPN's asked me if I'd be willing to do the NFL draft with them in '91, and out of that, they hired me. All I can tell you is, I could say the rest is history, but now I'm in the middle of my 23rd year, and I can tell you literally the rest is history because it's evolved so much.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was terrible on TV, by the way. If people had seen me, like, right now they would say, where did they hire that guy? Get that guy off the air. Actually, they wouldn't have let me on the air. But you got so many repetitions back then, and eventually you had to at least be able to do well. And the great thing about it is, more than anything, we've become an information age, what happens to be, one of my strengths, I hope. Anybody who's trying to get in the broadcast business, I tell them the same thing. It's like, get a journalism foundation, get a journalism background, because it's always going to come into play. Even if you're going to be an anchor, it doesn't matter, producer, it doesn't matter. You need a background in journalism and the basics of news gathering, of news dissemination, news discernment, the relationships that have to come with that. Because I've always seen people, that don't advance, maybe because they fell short in that area. So that's number one. And the next thing is if you have to be willing to go do it the right way, which is from the ground up. What did I do? I started off covering high school sports. I walked sidelines. I kept my own stats. Nobody handed me a stat sheet. And you learn how to work. And so, in a way, I know guys that came out of college and it's like they were bummed out because they had to cover high school sports. I said, you had to go in there and thank them for signing into high school sports. And so there is no job that's too small, because it's going to be a learning experience, and it's a place, in fact, to grow. So I would say, get that journalistic background, and whether it's in broadcasting, and get a lot of repetitions, and make sure that you're saving everything you do, because some of it's going to end up being on your resume, and some of it's going to be a video resume.
Yeah.
And guess what? You get to edit the best of what you do in those cases to get a look, and then you just hopefully get the door opens and the opportunity knocks. But just because it doesn't mean that you weren't prepared. I was very frustrated that I couldn't, kind of move on and grow professionally. I felt like, hey, I'm better than those guys, and it took a long time, but I just kept going.